Welcome to the Costa Rica Travel and Living Podcast. I'm your host, Adam Baker. I'm a British expat with well over 17 years living experience here in Costa Rica in Central America, so I know a thing or two about travel and living in this part of the world. This is your podcast where I speak to friends, expats, colleagues from around the industry of tourism here in Costa Rica about their everyday life to help you guys either plan your trip, or if you're thinking about making that big move down to Costa Rica, hopefully we can help you out with some ideas and answer some of those questions that most commonly come up. If you're enjoying this podcast, please don't forget to give us a like and or subscribe to never miss a weekly episode to wherever you get your podcasts. Today, my guest is Shelly Huff. Shelly has been in Costa Rica for over 14 years now and originally came down in 2009 from Boston after only 2 days during a surfing trip. After 2 days, she knew this was the country for her. Located up in Guanacaste, Shelly's lived in a number of little towns, primarily always for surfing, and has since begun raising her small family in this part of the world. However, with the explosion when it comes to real estate and tourism post-COVID, it's certainly causing Shelly cause for concern as she sees some of the differences with such a large influx of people. So we get to really discussing how this has impacted her local area and whether or not she thinks she'll be here for the long run. So, without further ado, let's get chatting with Shelly. Hey Shelly, good morning. How's it going?
It's going great, Adam. How you doing?
Not too bad. Thanks for joining us today on the podcast. I appreciate your time.
Thanks for inviting me. It's nice to be invited.
How's the weather up in Guanacaste today? September?
It's beautiful and sunny. I haven't seen a single cloud in the sky today. It's one of the great misconceptions about rainy season in Guanacaste. It's a little secret.
I was literally going to ask you, how much rain have you seen, and is it really that dry?
I mean, we've actually seen quite a bit of good heavy rains in August, but we've also seen an equal amount of really sunny days.
Yeah.
And it's enough. It's super lush and green. It doesn't look any different than the central section of the country, Manuel Antonio, or anything like that right now. But as soon as the rains stop, and within about a month, it'll look like Africa dry again.
Yeah, super dry.
It's so dry.
I always, obviously, people want to come away for like spring break, right, in March, April. But I'm like, if you go to Guanacaste in March and April, it's like Texas. It's like Savannah. It's
yeah.
dry.
And I tell people it's not what you think. Like when you see pictures of Costa Rica, what you're seeing is more Manuel Antonio, Arenal, that lush and all the wildlife. And then if you fly into Liberia, kind of like the first time I ever flew in, which was February, I was like, I think I got on the wrong plane. Like, I think I went to Liberia, Africa. And then, it's so dry and things burn. It's super hot. The winds kick up. You got to really want beach to come here in, that January to March time span.
Yeah. You got to really want it. But also, a lot of clients come in with that preconceived idea, right? The all-inclusives, the 5-star resorts, the nice beaches are in northern Guanacaste for that style. But you got to be, like you just said, you got to be prepared to have that slightly drier experience. You'll get a lot of sunshine. It'll be very hot, but it's not going to be super tropical.
Yeah, I mean, people don't seem to understand that those beach areas are not the same thing as the rainforest. And there's not sloths and scarlet macaws. You got to go south for that. So it's just straight up. You'll get some howler monkeys and a lot of garobos and iguanas and a lot of sunshine. Yeah, and a lot of sunshine. But if you want to do anything, you want to see waterfalls and those sorts of things, you can do all that in Guanacaste still, but you have to do day trips. It's just going to be more road time.
Yeah, it's true. And we always talk about the standard vacation. If you're coming to Costa Rica for the first time, 7 days, probably the Arenal volcano around the jungle, and then choose a beach location for 3 or 4 days. And that's usually Manuel Antonio, Central Pacific, or Guanacaste. I always think as we have this conversation, a lot of it also determines what kind of hotels you like. Because if you're really going for monkeys and sloths and macaws, you have to go to Manuel Antonio. But if you want that 5-star larger resort option and sunsets galore and snorkeling, then maybe you go to Guanacaste. It's a good way of separating them both.
Exactly. And the majority of what's in Manuel Antonio is like smaller boutique, kind of a little more, I call it authentic Costa Rica. So it's got those earthy gem tones that Costa Ricans like, a lot of wood. It's not like contemporary. There's a few of those, right? and you could get that. But like the real experience lies in those smaller places. My favorite hotel is Costa Verde. And that's because it's right next to the national park and everything's so very authentic Costa Rica about it. But there's like so much wildlife that comes right there. So as soon as people say they want wildlife and monkeys, and I'm like, that's the first place I'm going to try to send you.
Yeah, it's so true. It's funny you mentioned that. For anybody that's been in Costa Rica, I guess for a decade, maybe 2 decades or more, you'll remember those wooden properties from like the 90s and the early 2000s, like the Costa Verdes, the Mountain Paradises, even El Establo. And you have this typical redwood, which is built everywhere. And you can kind of get a feel for the property based on its interior design, the infrastructure. But what I noticed, interestingly, with some of the newer properties that still get built, even Nayara and Arenal or Amor Arenal is another good example, they still use a lot of the same wood, the same tones. They just seem to have a more modern design, but it still incorporates this color scheme, which is quite interesting. And they've got away, it looks really nice in a lot of the times. So there you go.
Some places do it better than others.
They do. Yeah. Sometimes you go into some hotels, not mentioning any names, and you see them, and, oh dear. Oh, the woods here, but that's about it.
Yeah, there's places, and I won't name any either, that I love to send clients because I like the location. I think that on-site amenities are fantastic. Maybe the views are outstanding. But if you look at the pictures of the interior of the rooms, like the bedspreads, that's very Tico. It's, that's when I use that word I love so much, is authentic. And you're coming here for part of the Costa Rican culture, but this is a very Costa Rican hotel.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I guess that's where the travel consultants and you guys as local experts kind of come into your own, because that. It's like, those are the marketing pictures, but that terrible fuchsia pink bed throw, don't worry about that. The on-site amenities are great. The beds are actually...
You're not going to be in the room anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Shelly, before we get stuck in, I'm excited to talk about Guanacaste today, because we haven't had anybody from the Tamarindo Playa Grande area yet on the podcast.
Okay.
There's a lot to discuss, but as ever, I'd love to hear a little bit about your story. What brought you to Costa Rica originally?
Surfing. I came here on a 10-day surf adventure back in February 2009. And I mean, I was at the time living in Boston, and the winters were kind of getting to me. I already had my eye on just kind of the idea of heading to the tropics a little more full time on a regular basis. Anyway, I booked 10 days down here. By the end of day 2, I had pretty much decided that surfing every day, wearing flip-flops, and the smell of sunscreen was all I wanted out of life. Screw everything else.
2 days.
And I pretty much,
2 days.
That's all it took. But there was something about when you get there and it's this beautiful stretch of beach. The water's warm. You don't need a wetsuit. And you paddle out, and the locals are super nice. I mean, within a day or two, I had people that I felt like I could call friends, but just meeting people in general. But like the overall vibe, it's so chill. And I just thought, this is the way to live. Why am I living any other way? Let me give it a shot. I went back to Boston. I called my mom and said, hey, can I bring you my dog in my car? I'm going to get rid of everything else. I'm just going to go see what I can make do in Costa Rica. And she said, of course. And I booked a ticket for 2 months later, and that was it. Wow. I made it work.
That's amazing. I guess people would ask you, did you have any like financial responsibilities? Was it easy at that point in your life to kind of up and drop off the car and the dog and go?
Yeah, I was a renter.
Yeah.
My assets were my dog and my car. Everything else I am very much a minimalist. So it was really easy to just kind of get rid of things and give them to charities and stuff. And in fact, it felt really good to be in the know that my belongings were a backpack full of clothes and a dog and a car, and that's it.
Yeah.
It was really freeing.
Yeah, I can imagine. When you first came down, I'm guessing it was a surfing location in Guanacaste, but where did you choose to base yourself for those first 2 months?
It was Tamarindo.
Okay.
So when I got here, I thought, well, let me stay in Tamarindo, and then I'll explore a little bit more, and maybe I'll see in a spot that I want to hit more. But I kind of just stuck in Tamarindo. The waves were really nice. They just kind of like, you can surf every day. Back then, it was way less populated too. It was a way smaller, calmer town. And was really easy to kind of know everybody a little bit, which is great on some hand, but then after a while, that small town lack of anonymity can drive you a wee bit
Yeah.
crazy. But anyway, no, I had no desire to really head to any other spot in Costa Rica. I was quite happy there.
Yeah, for sure. It makes sense. You've already found it on that first trip. Why would you change that? And obviously you have the freedom to travel, right? I guess another
Exactly.
question that comes to mind thinking about that, how did those first couple of years go for you? So what were you doing? How were you living? Were you just surfing, and what were you doing for work?
Yeah, I didn't have the bank account to just allow me to serve, but they're really stringent on, you can't just come here and work. You can't just, in Boston, I was a bartender and I thought, well, I could probably get a gig down there doing it, but no, it's not. That's not how it is.
Yeah.
So oddly, the first maybe 6 to 8 months, I had met a friend named Patrick who was renting this big house up on the hill, and I was cleaning his house and he paid me for it. And then eventually he just gave me one of the rooms in the house. So I was kind of like living.
Oh,
I was
wow.
paid. I was the housekeeper.
Nice. In this amazing place
Yeah.
up in Tamarindo.
Yeah, it was a score. I mean, I wasn't earning much, but I was very frugal with the money that I did have.
Yeah.
Over time, obviously that runs out. And if you can't legally work, you can't just walk in and get a job. You have to be creative. You have to create work for yourself.
Yeah.
And so, about a year after Tamarindo, I found myself moving to Playas del Coco, about an hour north. And there I saw this real lack of, gosh, now there's so many restaurants. But back then, like if you wanted a sandwich, you wanted something with avocado in it or a big salad, there wasn't really any options. It was all sodas or bar food.
Yeah.
So I just kind of found a way to create an open with as minimal amount of money as possible, like a small cafe. And I did that for a few years until I found like legit legal work at a hotel. So you just have to get creative here. You have to be industrious.
That's a really interesting story. It's funny you mentioned that. The number of times I've said to my friends that I wish there was like a local British breakfast lunch shop around the corner where I could just go and get a bacon and egg sarnie or a local.
Yes.
And I was like, it's something basic. Yeah, like it's just a sandwich, a lunch option. So even here in San Jose, everything's either too fancy or very local. And sometimes there's
Yeah.
that lacking of anything in between. Just a nice place to hang out. There's a few that are obviously opening up. But yeah, that's a fascinating little insight. What did you learn in terms of the culture, especially when you moved to Playas del Coco and you've been in town for maybe a year or so? Were there any cultural differences that surprised you? Obviously compared to Boston, but things you go, oh, I wasn't expecting that.
I don't know. I think like when I came to Costa Rica, I was really uninformed about the culture in general. So almost in a way, everything all along the way was a bit of a surprise. I was like, oh, that's how it is. Oh,
Yeah.
that's what they do. That's how they do that. Okay. I think
What were some
I
that
don't
surprised you
know.
the most? That you had to like get over that hump or get used to?
Well, it's a lot of little things.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just, well, I didn't realize just how nice people are here. They really are. The people are like truly super kind. But it's just little things. Like if you go to the hardware store, you can't go look through the inventory yourself. You have to go and tell somebody what you want. And if you need a shovel but you don't speak Spanish, you're in this predicament. Like, how do I get myself a shovel? Like the way things are done are so like just different from the US where we just walk in and we find what we want. A lot of stores are like that. Gosh, I don't know. I feel like there was so many just tiny things. And even to this day, I'm like, um, how people are kind of in their own space. So how to explain? You're driving down the road and in the middle of the road is a truck stop and because he's talking to his buddy over here and he doesn't care that he's blocking any traffic. Half the traffic doesn't care, even though it's only a 2-lane, nobody can get around. It's this sort of sense of this is what I'm doing for me right now. And I'm not really too concerned about how it's affecting everybody else.
Yeah. That
It's
happens a lot. Not just
it's a very Tico thing. They're not stressed about it. I'm
yeah.
not stressed about where you need to go. my friend's here. I'm going to chat with him real quick.
Yeah, yeah.
Like
Yeah,
that's really
it's
different
very
from the
true.
US.
I give the example, if you're walking in the street in San Jose, I'm just going to stop in the middle of the sidewalk or in the middle of the pedestrian area. It's just how it is. And you either walk around or yeah. No, it's funny as you were thinking about that. I was thinking about the differences I've noticed, especially in the Central Valley, in the more built up area.
Uh-huh.
Nowadays, you go into a construction store. Obviously, you've got a lot bigger stores, right? So you can go and find the shovel if you don't speak Spanish. But a lot more stores are now becoming a little bit more standardized, at least here in the developed area, where you can go in and you can ask. They will go, "Hey, I'm here if you need me." But there's no longer, "What do you need?" When I first came here myself, even here in San Jose or Heredia, I'm like, "I a pair of sports shorts." Like, and I was like, "Don't speak to me. I want to just roam. I just want to look around at my own leisure." But that's kind of calmed down. It's interesting to know that that's still the case, understandably, in some of the smaller.
Well, it's starting to become less so. I mean, I always joked about like if you needed a shovel, you went to this one store. But if you were there and like, I also need a hose, they'd say, well, you have to go to the hose store. It's
Yeah,
like 200 meters down the road. And the hose store literally has only hose.
yeah,
So like everything was really separated. Now we do have a lot more of the how do you say, like multi-purpose? I don't know.
yeah,
Where you could get more things. We have a Walmart in Liberia.
yeah,
We've got now the Colino, the hardware store. You can walk in and you can get what you need. You can get almost everything that you need.
yeah.
Almost.
Lightened up. So how did
Yeah.
you went from owning a small sandwich store to working legally at a hotel? Did you get your residency? How did you get that process going?
I had shortly after I moved here, and without even wanting to, I told myself I wasn't going to meet and get involved with a Costa Rican. That's not what I was here for, but that happened.
Right.
And it was a legit relationship. We ended up getting married in like 2011,
Okay.
something like
Nice.
that. And so that was my ticket to get residency.
Yeah.
I always like to be clear, I didn't marry for residency. It was
Yes.
legit.
It just happens. No.
Yeah, and it didn't work out, as some things don't. But I got a really great kid as a result, and then through having my son here, I did get permanent residency, so I'm all set with that.
Did you ever think at any point when having your son that, I want to go back to the US, or were you just completely set in raising your family here in Costa Rica where you were?
Oh, I know it. No, it was never a thought. Even when the relationship ended, at that time my son was 3,
Yeah.
there was never all right, time to go to the States. Like, this is home. I have roots. This is the longest I've ever lived in one spot at that point. Because prior, every 5 years, not planning it, but every 5 years I had this itch and I have to get up and move to a completely different city.
Oh, interesting.
And so this is now at 14 years, absolutely hands down the longest I've ever lived in one spot.
When you say one spot, you mean Guanacaste, or you mean actually a town within Guanacaste?
Well, Guanacaste, because since in that time I've lived Tamarindo, Coco, and now back here near Playa Grande. So there's 3 spots, but they're so close to each other.
Yeah.
I used to move from like Seattle to New York to Boston.
Yeah.
Things like,
That is a big jump, especially compared to Costa Rica.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about Playa Grande. How long have you been where you are now?
So I'm in a little town called Matapalo. It's on the road to Playa Grande. So it's just a few kilometers, maybe 7 minutes away. Playa Grande was always, it's a huge beach. That's why it's called Grande. Not very populated. It's the spot locals go to surf, more advanced waves. Just a few small restaurants to choose from. All of that is changing, and there's been an explosion in construction now, where it was just fields as you would drive in and you'd get to the beach. It was just 1 or 2 things, and now it's just all these lots and all these houses popping up. They released water rights, and to my knowledge, that's what happened. So now there's been a construction boom. So it's on its way to becoming a next little happening spot, maybe.
So this is what I wanted to talk to you about. Obviously, Playa Grande is adjacent to Tamarindo, very, very popular. Where you see thousands and thousands of people populate the area, hotels, Airbnbs in the high season, December to April, and then in the low season it goes to maybe 400 or 500 residents permanently. It used to be like lungs. A lot of these small towns in Costa Rica, they breathe, right, with the tourism, the influx, depending on the time
Yeah.
of year, and then they're a lot calmer in the off season. How have you seen? So I would like to talk to you about how you've seen. You touched on it there. All these lots that are now becoming available, construction's happening. We've seen this post-COVID boom in terms of construction, real estate, Airbnbs, second home rentals. That's obviously having an impact on how it was before COVID and how it is after. Can you talk about some of the pros and cons and how it's affecting your daily life and what you see and how that makes you feel, honestly?
Oh, I mean, for sure. It's something that, I mean, on one hand, it really bothers me.
Yeah.
And, excuse me, because you see the landscape change. You don't just see the landscape change, you see the vibe and the energy change completely. It used to be that it breathed, right? September and October would be quiet. That's when you knew that's what the true locals were here. And now the amount of people that are here in September and October is what used to be here in high season.
Wow.
So it's consistent year round. But in terms of the influx of people who've moved here, obviously it's desirable, right? I'm here, you're here. People want to be in a place that's relaxed and warm weather and everything. COVID, because of the stringent, I'm assuming that's why, right? The stringent things happening up north, people really were like, now it's time to go. We can work online. Let's go out and venture around. I mean, granted, we were seeing kind of a boom before that, but that really skyrocketed. And now it's literally every day there's another lot being cleared. You know, there's another huge house being built on the hill, so they have their ocean views. The number of big cars on the road, the amount of traffic is insane. This intersection near where I live in Huacas, sometimes you could be 45 minutes to an hour waiting in the afternoon to get the equivalent of like 350 meters.
Yeah.
And you say, where did all these people come from? Where are they going? Because you've got all this construction, you've got all this happening. So more locals or people are going to move here to fill in jobs that are starting to kind of pop up and be created. So you're not just getting a massive population burst from northerners or foreigners, but also from other Costa Ricans moving to the area. The infrastructure can't handle it here. It just hasn't been updated enough. And so for me, that's kind of, it's a bummer, right? They seem to bring a lot of them, that same energy from the north as well. So it's the really fast cars, people in a hurry, a little bit more aggression, with the horns and things. And that's really not what the overall vibe always was here. So when you see that kind of change, you go, oh, it's not what it was. Back in the day, it was this.
Yeah, and it's a really good point. How does that make you feel about like your thoughts about the future? Would you stay where you are? Would you look for another small?
No. To be honest, I'm in this area now. I'm going to stay here so my son can go to school.
Yeah.
Because, excuse me, I'll just take a quick sip.
Sure. So I always have my tea on hand.
We have we have a lot of schools in the area. Not all are great, but there's a lot of options, right? So, but my kid's currently in a pretty great school, so I want to stick here with it. Once he's done, he's only 10, so we've got a long stretch.
Yeah.
I think for me, I don't know if I would move back to the States or if I would choose to move somewhere else within Costa Rica. If I did Costa Rica, I'd go somewhere cooler. I'd go inland maybe. But no, I don't want to stay in this area. It's become too crowded. It's become too much of, I don't know, it's just not as desirable for me anymore. But if you're somebody that's just now coming down, it's still like, wow, what a great area.
Sure.
Because you're probably coming from a place that had 10 times more traffic and 10 times more crazy frenetic energy. So no, but I mean, there are some bonuses, I have to admit, and sometimes I hate to admit them, but like with the influx of especially northerners comes more choices for us. Like we got that Price Mart by the airport. Like to be able to go and be like, wow, I could buy some really quality stuff in bulk. That's kind of cool. The markets are carrying a lot more North American foods that we used to just my God, yellow lemons for
Right.
years.
Rather
You
than
could
the
not
big
find a
ones.
yellow lemon in Costa Rica.
That's right.
And now they're available like twice a year because there's this demand from it. So there's little things that are
Yeah.
like, that's kind of nice. There's more restaurants. There's an Indian restaurant now.
Yeah.
So stuff like that's pretty cool, but I don't think that I don't know. I don't know if it's weighing out for me, but
Yeah, it's a really interesting point, isn't it? Because it's always about it's trying to find that balance. And obviously you have had the
yeah,
experience in the years of knowing when it was wonderful, tranquil, the pura vida lifestyle that you originally wanted. And then of course you missed those smaller things, but those are the things ultimately that you left and we're looking for the larger thing, right? So when those small things come to you, I guess it's kind of that, oh, that's nice for a moment. Those endorphins kick off for the yellow lemons and a trip to Price Mart. And then
yeah,
ultimately you get into bed and you start thinking about the bigger picture. Because it's true. I've seen the
yeah,
same thing with the imported products here in the Central Valley, and not just from the US or Canada, the German products, the British products, the French products.
yeah,
So they're readily available as it becomes a slightly more multicultural country in general. But I think, yeah, it always goes back to that balance about, what is the most important thing. And I guess when you talk about those new people coming down, whether they're moving or they're renting for a long term or they're on a digital nomad visa, they're staying for 6 months to a year. And then you get the Price Smart, and then you think, wow, actually, I have a number of things from home, but I get this wonderful weather. And you're right, it's still 10 times less crazy than it was in Boston or New York or Seattle. Um,
yeah.
yeah, it's a
None of
different,
those things make it so bad that I'm, I
yeah,
want to get out of here now. I just don't think it's my forever spot anymore.
yeah. Did you think that pandemic, or like at what point did you realize this was becoming an issue? Is that a recent kind of feeling in the last year or so?
It was just post COVID because it really was like a wave of people
Yeah,
came down. Now I live in kind of a I'm sorry, an expat community. It's like these condos with security, and people are really drawn to it because you've got 2, 3 bedrooms and it's really safe. So during COVID, it was fairly empty. I'm sorry, I'm just not used to talking so much.
there you go.
Um,
It's okay.
it filled up, and it has been full ever since with these like huge families full of kids. And so I feel like I'm almost in a little piece of America here in this neighborhood. But you go out the gate and you're in a very typical small, very typical Tico town.
Yeah. Do you
So it's
like the
kind of nice. I do have that balance.
I was going to ask you if you like that balance, because Tamarindo has a pretty large expat community as well. Playa Grande as well is quite close by, and obviously you're coming from a background of various different surfing spots, so you get a lot of different expats from all over the world that come together that obviously share the passion of surfing or generally being outdoors, sun, sea lifestyle. So I'm guessing that
Yeah.
nice to go back to your smaller place, have that local feel, but then if you need to make friends, you can quite close by.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, like when I lived in Coco, that was a serious Tico town. And I
Yeah,
had a really hard time finding people to relate to because I've never truly connected with the culture here. So I don't have a lot of Tico friends, to be perfectly honest. Um, but that it was, and I lived in the like the barrio with all the barking dogs and the chickens and stuff. I had
yeah,
that full experience for several years. And it was great on some levels, and on other levels, no.
yeah. No, for
So I
sure.
was relieved when I found this condo because it just didn't have the annoying elements,
Yeah,
just
or the
quieter.
farmyard in the background. Yeah, yeah, no, I can imagine. It doesn't surprise me. Again, I spent maybe just over a year in Monteverde when I first started my Costa Rican experience in my early 20s. And that's very off the beaten track. This is when the road all the way up the mountain wasn't even, completely finished. There, everything's a lot more rural. And like you said at the start of this chat, sometimes it takes its toll when you're in a very small community after a while. But you can
Yeah.
you can see it growing quickly, and you even in the case of the places in the middle of the cloud forest, shopping malls, massive bus stops, huge amounts of restaurants. One thing I wanted to ask you is, do you think now that I know I've listened to another couple of podcasts, and I've started to see this not tourism boom per se, but the real estate boom slow down slightly as we're now 2 or 3 years out of these travel restrictions. If it slows down on your end, would that make you think twice about staying, or do you expect it to keep growing and growing? And if that's the case, how does that impact the local area on large? Like, where does it go from here?
Man, I don't know. I mean, you say at some point it's got to kind of dip down. At some point, people are going to start coming and going, yeah, it's already too crowded.
Yeah.
But, you know, my mom pointed out, they used to go to Mexico. She showed me pictures of what it was like. And I can't remember which town, one of the coastal places, when they used to go and what it looks like now. And I said, oh my God, that's what's happening where I live. And it was like literally the entire hillsides, everything is now built up there. And I thought I could see that potentially happening here, even though we say, you know, the government, Costa Rica in general, wants to protect so much its own asset of
Yeah.
what is its asset, right? It's the land itself, right? And the beaches. So if all that suddenly gets built up, is it still an asset? Do people still want to come here? I don't know. But I can't say. I mean, who knows what'll happen in the next couple of years? I may fall in love with it. I may get out quicker,
Yeah.
but for now I'm pretty content. You know, I do still there's no such place as paradise. I don't care where somebody lives. There's going to be downsides and upsides, right? So,
Always.
um, you know, that's just how it is for me here too. When people first get here, you know, the penny is really shiny, right? And it's all like, wow,
Yes.
look at everything.
Yeah.
And the longer you stay, the luster on that penny kind of fades away a little bit. And so I don't share that same enthusiasm as people who, when they first get here, gosh, when I first got here, I was so, this is everything. Nothing
Yeah.
can go wrong here.
Yeah.
Nothing, but you know,
No,
it's just
I
time.
can relate to that in a fair bit, and I appreciate your honesty because, you know, a lot of the time we're speaking to some people that maybe they've only been here for a few years. Obviously, when you've been here for more than 10 years and you really know the culture, you know the area, you can see the impact, especially if you're living on an area that's more popular with tourism, access to the beach. You know, these things happen. And I always, in my case, I need to go back a couple of times a year to the UK, 2 or 3 weeks if possible, see my family, remind myself of why I chose to stay in Costa Rica. In my case, I didn't consciously choose to leave. I chose to stay when I was already here from a trip. But when I get
Mhm.
those 2 or 3 weeks, I get those hits from stuff I need at home, the people, the climate, the food, whatever it is. Then I come back and it just gives me a slight, you know, I'm revitalized slightly to land back in my case in San Jose here in the center and come back to the culture, which so that's something I do. I do have that importance. For some people, maybe they don't go back as much and they need to escape the city or wherever they've come from. But
Mhm.
maybe for you, yeah, who knows? If you travel back a bit or you do decide to go back to the US, or who knows, travel somewhere else, another surfing destination.
I don't know. But you know, the same thing happens to me, Adam. If I go and I spend 2 or 3 weeks in a state, and while I'm there, I'm like, oh my God, you have sidewalks and
Yeah,
traffic lights. This is
they work
awesome.
and everything's soft.
Yay.
Yeah,
And then, but always by the time I leave there and I come back to Costa Rica and that ride back from the airport, I am like, oh my God, I'm so happy to be back.
yeah,
I love it here. So, you know, you get that freshening and um, to remind you about just how it really is an amazing place. And that's why I'm
yes,
still here after 14 years.
yeah.
I do love it. And I don't know where else you could get the same vibe, and the people here are amazing. I think that's what makes Costa Rica is truly the people. They're very different.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think it's more than culture, it's the people themselves. And you talk about
Mhm.
assets. There's only so much land in Costa Rica, and you can find beautiful tropical jungle in lots of parts of Central America. But not all places are as safe, and certainly not all places are as friendly, as welcoming, and as warm. And that's one of
Yeah.
the things, it's one of the reasons we probably live here so easily. I always thought if I'd ended up in Nicaragua or Ecuador or somewhere else in South America, maybe I wouldn't have actually stayed and I would be back in the UK at some point or doing something else in my life. But
Yeah. Would you have been as welcome? They really welcome you here. They don't make you feel like you're intruding at
yes,
all.
yeah, no, it's a really good point. One of my final questions, Shelley, I always love to ask. I've already asked you, are you here for the long run? And you know, honestly, you're not sure. That's an interesting one to see where, you know, where the next few years takes you. But if somebody asks you, what tips would you give them? Not really about traveling, but they're thinking about, you know, making the big move to come to Costa Rica. Would you recommend Guanacaste? And what would you say to do before you come down? What are your tips?
Yeah, I do recommend Guanacaste, oddly,
Yeah.
because it's a good, um, there's not culture shock here. There's a cultural difference, but now we have the similarities to the US and Canada in particular, where you don't feel like you've just dropped off where you don't know what's going on or the language, or people here have a modicum of English. They're happy to help you understand. They're happy to help you in various ways. So this is a good place to kind of get your toes wet, so to speak, without having to jump all the way in.
Yeah.
And we have those conveniences. We have great schools. I mean, there's a lot of things that make it an easy move. I definitely recommend you don't jump all in. Don't sell everything, ship the car down and buy a house or start building anywhere in this country before you've come down and lived and rented for a year. And I think everybody should come and live in a Tico neighborhood, live in a Tico house. Don't go rent a huge, house in the fancy subdivision. Actually live it with the Ticos. Get a sense of what the actual culture and life are here. And then build your fancy house on the hill.
Yeah, and then you can do it.
But like immerse yourself, get into it, and then find out where really fits you, because maybe you find after 6 months that like a place is too busy, or maybe it's not busy enough. Maybe you're not meeting enough people that you jive with. So, rent first for a year and really sink in and figure out where you want to be. Don't fully jump in. I've seen a lot of people make a big investment, and within 1 or 2 years, they're out of here and they lose, how much of their investment.
Yeah, it's a really good point. That immersion, especially with the locals as well, you'll kind of get to grips with what you love and what you find challenging, I think, so much quicker. That's for sure. Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've enjoyed about doing these podcasts is that it invigorates me to visit these different areas again, different travel consultants, different friends, colleagues, expats around the country. Like you say, after a number of years, it's not that you get blindsided. You just feel like, it does help to go back out, hit the road, go back home, come back in, learn to appreciate it again, because you do need that sometimes. I think that's the case anyway, right? The grass is always greener. So you've got to remind yourself of how lovely it is here. That's
absolutely it. The grass is always greener, but it's just as green right where you're standing. You just have to have the positive outlook. You just have to, it's perception.
I love it. Shelly, thank you so much for talking to me. It's been an absolute insight. Really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed yourself.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's lovely.
No worries.
Always good to see you.
We'll make sure to put your contact information, if anybody's watching on YouTube, in the description box below, or on our podcast, different where you can find your podcast in the different locations. So if anybody wants to ask you about living in Playa Grande, travel to Costa Rica in general, they can reach out to you, and hopefully I can chat to you in the near future about some of your favorite tourism spots, hotels, off the beaten path gems in and around Tamarindo.
For sure. Let me know when.
Sounds good. Have a great afternoon, and catch up soon.
Thanks, Adam.
Cheers,
ciao for now.
A really great chat there with Shelly. Always appreciate the honesty, and sometimes we don't always talk about the impact that such a popular destination like Costa Rica can have on the locals, but also some of the foreign expats that have been here for a number of years, especially in the more built up areas, as the post-COVID boom has taken an effect on so much more properties, homes, rental homes and hotels going up in these areas. So it's really interesting to get Shelly's insights. Generally always pretty wonderful in Costa Rica, but certainly something to think about, especially if you're moving to some of these hot spots. And again, Shelly's advice in coming down for at least a year, renting, getting to know the locals, immerse yourself in the culture to see if it's the right spot and place for you. As ever, if you want to reach out to Shelly, you can find her information in the description box below associated with this podcast. And please always ask us, guys, have you got any questions? What do you want to have on the next episode, so I can ask this of some of my friends, colleagues that I chat to in future episodes on the Costa Rica Travel and Living podcast. Please don't forget to give us a thumbs up and subscribe if you're enjoying it. And of course, never miss out on a weekly episode. From myself, Adam Baker, see you guys next week. Hasta la próxima.